working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Joining me today is from our EBC Thailand Bureau. Hello, Esther.
Hi, I'm Esther Adanga from EBC Thailand Bureau, giving you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
President
Joe Biden said the United States was taking action against Myanmar's military, including freezing access to U.S.-based assets, as he urged its generals to relinquish power.
Thai pro-democracy protesters returned to the streets of Bangkok Wednesday after nearly 2 months.
President Duterte appealed to the Communist Party of the Philippines and is arming the New People's Army to guarantee the unhampered and safe transport of the vaccines throughout the country.
Singapore chefs serve up hope for street food's future.
President Joe Biden said the United States was taking action against Myanmar's military, including freezing its access to U.S.-based assets, as he urged its generals to relinquish power. Biden said his administration was cutting off the generals' access to $1 billion in funds in the U.S. and would soon unveil new sanctions. Take a look.
The U.S. government is taking steps to prevent the generals from improperly having access to the $1 billion in Burmese government funds held in the United States. And today, I've approved a new executive order, excuse me, a new executive order enabling us to immediately sanction the military leaders who directed the coup, their business interests, as well as close family members. We will identify at first round of targets this week, and we're also going to impose strong exports controls. We're freezing U.S. assets that benefit the Burmese government while maintaining our support for health care, civil society groups, and other areas that benefit the people of Burma directly. And finally, as protests grow, violence against those asserting their democratic rights is unacceptable, and we're going to keep calling it out. The people of Burma are making their voices heard, and the world is watching. We'll be ready to impose additional measures, and we'll continue to work with our international partners to urge other nations to join us in these efforts. As you know, the assault on Burma's transition to democracy remains an issue of deep bipartisan concern. We've consulted at length, for example, with Senator McConnell, who has had a very keen interest in this, and his team, and we welcome their helpful insights. We've also been in close contact with our allies and partners around the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, driving vigorous diplomatic outreach to help coordinate an international response to what happened. The strong and unified message emerging from the United States has been essential, in our view, to encouraging other countries to join us in pressing for immediate return to democracy. Last week, the United States helped bring together the UN Security Council, which issued a strong statement in support of Burmese democracy. And this week, we will use our renewed engagement on the Human Rights Council to strengthen the world's commitment to human rights in Burma.
U.S. law forbids assistance to governments that take power in coups, although virtually all U.S. funding to Myanmar is channeled through non-governmental groups. Top generals, including the Army Chief who led the coup, Min Aung Hlaing, are already under U.S. travel and financial sanctions for Myanmar's brutal campaign against the mostly Muslim Rohingya people.
As a young female anti-coup protester fights for her life after being shot in Myanmar's capital this week, a potentially dangerous hunt to find the shooter has been launched on social media. A 15-meter long billboard banner with artwork depicting the moment she was shot was hung off a bridge in Yangon on Wednesday, while some protesters have carried photos of her as they march. Instead of celebrating her 20th birthday Thursday, Maya Twat Kang lies on an intensive care hospital bed, her head covered in bandages with patches over her eyes. The grocery store worker is among the hundreds of thousands across the country to have risked their safety and taken to the streets in outrage over the ousting of civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi in the military coup. Doctors say she needs help to breathe with machines and only has a small chance of survival. The bullet shot through her skull, so she is in a critical condition, according to Naypyidaw doctor, as her devastated family kept a vigil by her bedside. Graphic video is circulating online of Maya Twat Kang falling to the ground and onlookers scrambling to give first aid to the long-haired teenager in a red t-shirt with cartoon pandas. Amnesty International says it has verified footage of the incident and says police recklessly targeted protesters with no respect for their lives or safety whatsoever.
Meanwhile, the military rulers who seized power in Myanmar insisted that military rule would be different this time, as martial law was declared across swathes of the country after massive protests against the new junta. New junta chief General Min Aung Hlaing made his first televised speech since seizing power, insisting that the putsch was justified by voter fraud. Take a look.
COVID-19 အကြောင်းပြုပြီးကြိုတင်ဆန္ဒမဲပေးခြင်းတွေကိုကြီးညာခြင်းအမျိုးမျိုးထုတ်ပြီးဆောင်ရွက်ခဲ့တာတွေတရားမျှတတဲ့မဲဆွယ်စည်းရုံးခွင့်များရှိခဲ့တာတွေဟာရွေးကောက်ပွဲမတိုင်မီကတည်းကအငြင်းပွားစာတွေဒီလိုတွေးရှိချက်တွေမဲသမာမှုတွေစင်းနေအတွက်သက်ဆိုင်ရာတာဝန်ရှိသူများကိုစစ်စစ်မေးမြန်းလည်းရှိနေပါတယ်ရေပေါ်ကာလဆိုင်ရာပြဋ္ဌာန်းချက်များနဲ့အညီဆောင်ရွက်ပြည်စည်းပြလို့ရှိရင်ဖွဲ့စည်းပုံအခြေခံဥပဒေ2008ခုနှစ်နဲ့အညီလွတ်လပ်ပြီးတရားမျှတတဲ့ပါတီစုံဒီမိုကရေစီထူထူရွေးကောက်ပွဲကိုပြန်လည်ကျင်းပပြီးအနာရတဲ့ပါတီကိုဒီမိုကရေစီစံချိန်စံနှုန်းများနဲ့အညီနိုင်ငံတော်တာဝန်ကိုလွှဲအပ်နိုင်ရေးဆက်လက်ဆောင်ရွက်သွားရန်ဖြစ်ပါတယ်။တိုင်းဒေသပြည်သူလူထုတရားလုံးစိတ်ခံစားမှုတဲ့ပဂရိအချက်လက်များအမှန်တရားများကိုရှေ့ရှုပြီးလက်တွဲညီဆောင်ရွက်သွားကြပါစို့လို့မေတ္တာရပ်ခတိုက်တွန်းလိုပါတယ်။အားလုံးကိုကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်။
The general also said that the country welcomed foreign investment and also announced the lifting of coronavirus restrictions, including reopening of schools and Buddhist pagodas. He added that Rohingya refugees who fled to Bangladesh during a 2017 crisis will continue to be repatriated to Rakhine State. The junta proclaimed a one-year state of emergency last week, promising to hold fresh elections after that without offering any precise time frame.
Hundreds of anti-coup protesters from tourism sector on Thursday chant slogans as they march on through temples and pagodas in the ancient UNESCO heritage city of Bagan. Across Myanmar, people in the tourism sector have joined the nationwide call of civil disobedience. Meanwhile, Myanmar's ruling generals signaled waning patience and have warned demonstrators to return to work. Demonstrations condemning the ouster of civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi have largely been peaceful, although security forces earlier in the week used tear gas, water cannon, and rubber bullets on protesters, with isolated reports of live rounds being fired. In the most significant concrete action, President Joe Biden announced his administration was cutting off the general's access to $1 billion in funds in the United States.
More protests. Hundreds of Burmese workers staged an anti-coup protest in front of the UN office in Bangkok. They're calling the organization to take action against Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, who staged a coup in Myanmar on February 1st. Let's listen in.
ทุกคนเนี่ยหลับ ไม่ได้เลยค่ะตอนนี้ทำอะไรก็ไม่ได้เขาก็ห้างอย่างเงี้ยค่ะเวลาหนูกลับไปพม่าเนี่ยมันอาจจะยังไงอาจจะแบบไม่โอเคอะค่ะอยู่ไม่สบายเหมือนเมื่อก่อนนะคะ
The protesters were singing their revolutionary song, Kabar Makiay Bu. They were holding up their three-fingered salute borrowed from the Thai pro-democracy movement, and they burned the photos of Min Aung Hlaing. Thailand's prime minister, a former army chief who seized power in a coup in 2014, has made no public comments about neighboring Myanmar's putsch, though his number two, Prawit Wongsuwan, said the issue was a domestic affair. Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Tani Sangrat told reporters Thailand hopes for the current situation to be resolved peacefully and return to normalcy soon. There are over 1 million Myanmar migrant workers in Thailand, according to official figures, but the true number is believed to be much higher.
Foreign investors flocked to Myanmar as it began its democratic transition a decade ago. But this week's military coup could accelerate a trend of Western withdrawal and China's expansion. On the streets of Yangon and Naypyidaw, worries are growing over the economy, which had already been hit by the pandemic. Let's watch this.
နိုင်ငံတကာပိတ်ဆို့မှုတွေဖြစ်ကောင်းဖြစ်လာနိုင်တယ်ဖြစ်ဖို့လည်းအလားအလာရှိပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ပို့ပြီးတော့ပြည်သူလူထုအနေနဲ့ကိုဗစ်ကာလကိုလည်းကြုံခဲ့တယ်စာဝတ်နေတွေအခက်အခဲဖြစ်ခဲ့တယ်အခုဒီလိုမျိုးအာဏာသိမ်းလိုက်တဲ့အပေါ်မှာလည်းစီးပွားရေးပိတ်ဆို့မှုတွေဖြစ်လာမယ်ဆိုရင်ပြည်သူလူထုတွေကခါးတီးပြီးခံမှာပြည်သူလူထုပဲသူတို့စီမှာတော့ဒီတော့သူလည်းတားတဲ့မြေစားလို့မကုန်ဘူးလို့အခုတော့သိရတယ်လေ
ဟိုကအမှားရှိရင်ကုန်းပေါ်ကမပုတ်နိုင်ဘူးနော်မပုတ်နိုင်အလောက်ကန်ကတော်တော်လေးကိုပြဿနာအခုလက်ရှိတော့မှအလောက်လက်မဲ့တွေကများနေအောင်ဒီစီးပွားရေးကတော်တော်ကြီးကိုတော်တော်ဆွဲတင်ရမှာပေါ့နော်အခုတော့မှတော်တော်များတယ်ပိတ်တဲ့ဆက်ရုံတွေအများကြီးအဲကြောင့်မလို့အလားလာကတော့တိတ်မမြင်ဘူး
The garment sector has boomed in recent years, bolstered by scores of international brands such as H&M, Gap and Adidas, which shifted their production to factories in Yangon's outskirts. According to Singapore-based Capital Economics, made in Myanmar clothing, footwear and handbags make up 3% of the country's gross domestic product. But with military back in power, a Yangon-based private sector source worries for the fate of the industry's 700,000 workers.
In Thailand, pro-democracy protesters returned to the streets of Bangkok after nearly 2 months. People were rallying across Bangkok to call for the resignation of Premier Prayut Chan-o-cha, and also they're calling for the reforms to the monarchy. The protests came a day after court denied bail to 4 prominent democracy leaders who were charged under the kingdom's draconian royal defamation laws. Since the pro-democracy movement kicked off in July, more than 50 protesters have been charged under the laws and faced up to 15 years in jail. At the movement's peak last year, tens of thousands of people rallied across Bangkok to call for the resignation of Premier Prayut Chan-o-cha. Protesters were also breaking a long-held taboo by demanding reforms to the country's unassailable monarchy. Also joining the protests were scores of Myanmar migrant workers, a front of solidarity for pro-democracy values after their home country was plunged back under military rule last week when their leader Aung San Suu Kyi was ousted.
A crash Indonesian passenger jet's throttles showed an anomaly and had been repaired several times before the deadly accident. But the exact cause of last month's fatal dive was still unclear, investigators said Wednesday.
Dan pelayanan investigasi dan kerjasama Bapak.
A potential malfunction in Sriwijaya Air Boeing 737-500's engine control system was highlighted in a preliminary report on January 9 crash, which killed all 62 passengers and crew, including nearly a dozen children. The 26-year-old plane, previously flown by US-based Continental Airlines and United Airlines, plunged around 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters and crashed into waters of Jakarta just minutes after takeoff. On Wednesday, investigators said they were probing the auto-throttle system as they published their interim report. National Transportation Safety Committee investigator Nurkayo Utomo said the left or engine throttle was moving backward too far while the right was not moving at all and it was stuck. He said he can't conclude anything just yet. Authorities have previously said the crew did not declare an emergency or report technical problems with the aircraft before its dive, and that it was probably intact when it hit the water. Communications with air traffic control were described as normal up until the moment that the plane sharply deviated its intended course and crashed. There are no indication that bad weather played a pivotal role in the accident. Authorities said 2 other commercial planes flew the same route without incident just before and after the plane.
Back to Thailand, a court there denied bail to 4 prominent democracy activists after they were indicted for violating the kingdom's royal defamation law. The first formal charges laid against the leaders of a movement calling for reforms to the monarchy. Demonstrations in Bangkok last year against the government of former Army Chief Premier Prayut Chan-o-cha drew tens of thousands at their peak, with many calling for changes to the country's once unassailable royal family. Criticism of the monarchy is taboo due to harsh lay majeste laws that carry penalties of up to 15 years in jail per charge. Since the movement kicked off in July, more than 50 protesters have been hit with a charge, but authorities have allowed all to be bailed. The 4 were also indicted for sedition, which carries a maximum penalty of 7 years in jail, as well as violating anti-gathering rules and other laws. Among them is student activist Parit Chiwarak, also known as Penguin, and human rights lawyer Anon Numpa, arguably the 2 most well-known faces of the movement. And the Thai Irrigation Department is on full alert over the quality of tap water in Bangkok. Let's find out why from Crystal Di Maruco joining us live. Hello, Crystal.
Sawadika Alma, and good afternoon to all our viewers. Here are the latest updates here in Thailand. The Irrigation Department has been on full alert over the quality of Bangkok area's tap water. The encroachment of salt water into the Chao Phraya River, which is a source of much of central Thailand's water, has been accelerated due to the drought situation. Meanwhile, people who are living on the east side of the river might experience shortages of water for consumption as well as agricultural purposes. Therefore, people are encouraged to use water sparingly until the middle of this year. For 2 consecutive years, rainfall in Thailand was below average, which decreases water levels in dams and allows more salt water into the Chao Phraya River and affects its residents. According to Sanya Saengpampong, Inspector General at the Agriculture Ministry and Acting Director General of the department, the salt level had raised after high sea tides in January, which led to difficulties with tap water production because the salinity was above a critical level. He also added that on February 13 to 14, high tides in the Gulf of Thailand were expected to raise the water level at the mouth of the Chao Phraya River, causing an incursion of salt water upstream. Therefore, campaign to decrease the intrusion of salt water may not be fully achieved, and the taste of Bangkok's tap water can be salty at times. All irrigation projects around Chao Phraya River Basin had been asked to assist in controlling the salinity level, said Mr. Sanya. The government is implementing various water management measures and will monitor the encroachment of salt water from January to May this year. Members of the public are encouraged to use water prudently, and farmers are advised to grow crops that require less water so they can make the most use of available water. And that's the latest news here in Bangkok. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Crystal, for your updates there. See you later, and please stay safe, stay alert.
Thank you for having me today. Have a nice weekend. Reporting live from Bangkok, Thailand, this is Crystal Murukat. Really in interesting times.
All right, Esther and I will be back with more here on ASEAN in Focus right after this short break.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced, not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Aguila Pilipinas. A 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Aguila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Aguila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to explain our health outdoor.
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Welcome back to the program. To more news, China delivered 600,000 doses of its Sinopharm coronavirus vaccine to ally Cambodia on Sunday, making the kingdom the latest country to use Chinese jab despite concerns about their efficacy compared to Western alternatives. Cambodian leader Hun Sen announced last month that China would donate 1 million doses of its coronavirus vaccine to the kingdom, which will cover 500,000 people because of 2 doses are required. Let's watch this.
រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលនិងប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាពិតជាមានការដឹងគុណដ៏ជ្រាលជ្រៅចំពោះរដ្ឋាភិបាលនិងប្រជាជនចិនដែលបានផ្ដល់នូវជំនួយវ៉ាក់សាំងចំនួន 60,000 ដុសជាជំហានទី 1 ក្នុងចំណោម 1 លានដុសតាមរយៈក្រសួងការពារជាតិចិនជូនដល់កងទ័ពនិងប្រជាជនកម្ពុជានៅពេលនេះខ្ញុំសូមគូបញ្ជាក់ជាថ្មីម្ដងទៀតថាវ៉ាក់សាំង Sinopharm របស់ចិនរបស់មិត្តចិនដែលត្រូវបានផ្ដល់មកកម្ពុជានេះគឺជាប្រភេទវ៉ាក់សាំងដែលត្រូវបានទទួលស្គាល់ថាជាវ៉ាក់សាំងមួយដែលមានសុវត្ថិភាពនិងមានប្រសិទ្ធភាពសម្រាប់ស្រទាប់មនុស្សអាយុពី 18 ឆ្នាំដល់ 59 ឆ្នាំហើយត្រូវបានបញ្ជាទិញព្រមទាំងអនុម័តឲ្យប្រើប្រាស់ដោយប្រទេសជាច្រើននៅក្នុងតំបន់និងលើសកលលោកក្នុងនាមរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជានិងក្នុងនាមខ្លួនខ្ញុំតបខ្ញុំសូមសម្ដែងអំណរគុណជាថ្មីម្ដងទៀតជូនដល់រដ្ឋាភិបាលនិងប្រជាជនចិនចំពោះជំនួយវ៉ាក់សាំង 1 លានដុសតាមរយៈក្រសួងការពារជាតិជូនដល់កងទ័ពនិងប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាក្នុងឱកាសចូលឆ្នាំចិនដែលឈានមកដល់ក្នុងពេលឆាប់ខាងមុខនេះ ខ្ញុំសូមតាំងនាមរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលនិងប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាជូនពរដល់ប្រជាជនចិនសូមទទួលបានជោគជ័យក្នុងការងារនិងវិវត្តភាពចម្រើនរុងរឿង
The first people to get the jobs include frontline health workers, teachers, soldiers, the premier's bodyguards, and officials around the king. Cambodia plans to vaccinate at least 10 million of its 16 million population with shots from China's Sinopharm and Sinovac, as well as the British-Swedish AstraZeneca. Cambodia has long been a staunch ally of Beijing's, receiving billions of dollars in soft loans and investments.
In other news, Vaccine Czar Secretary Garlido Galvez Jr. said the government will hold internal final rehearsal 2 or 3 days before the scheduled arrival of the vaccines in the country. This is to assure the preparedness for the massive inoculation campaign. He also said the National Task Force Against COVID-19 chief implementer, he cited, meanwhile, the importance of conducting the full-scale simulation exercise, particularly the management of the vaccine, logistics, and the deployment of vaccines to cold chain warehouses. Let's take a look.
So meron po tayong team uploading, receiving, and inspection of vaccines. After which, yun naman po mga bakuna ay isa-isa na po yung mga credo boxes. Papasok na po yan sa ating ultra-low freezers capable of storing the vaccines meeting a temperature range requirement of between 60 to negative 80 degrees centigrade. No?
Okay po tayo sa natin. May mga nakita kami mga ibang mga tatawag na minimal. Nakita natin may nag-shake yung Kailangan namin na dapat i-minimize because of the sensitivity ng mga vaccine. So, may mga tinake note kami at saka si Secretary Dugade and also Secretary Page na mga nakita namin mga minimal naman na pwede namin i-correct. Kasi ang balak namin after this, magkakaroon pa kami ng another internal sa amin na simulation again. So, yung lang po ang nakita natin yung importante yung handling ng vaccines. At the same time, yung tinatawag natin yung timing motion, nakuha po natin. Sa akin po, nakita ko ngayon yung kung i-rate po natin, nasa 80% po tayo, mga 100.
So from the rehearsals or simulation today, nandito po yung target time na binabanggit ng DOH na kailangan na travel, na ito, yes, ano po.
Okay. Yan yung target natin. Target natin una yung sa clearing sa Bureau of Customs 30 minutes. And then yung loading ng vaccines is 15 minutes. And then yung transport ng vaccine, maabot na mga more or less 20 minutes. And then also yung tinatawag natin na yung pagpunta sa warehouse, 30 minutes. All in all, maabot ng 120 minutes. So nakita natin kanina, nakuha lang natin na more or less 50 minutes.
Sir, meron pong may mga nagpo-cover dito kasi sa ibang hospital. I understand that after po ng mga hindi na pumunta ng hospital, may mga reports lang po, and if you can clarify na may ilang hospitals na hindi pa ata ganun ka-informed na merong simulation today, or is that accurate? Or,
yes, ang simulation din natin, aside from the airport to RITM, meron dito tayong simulation from RITM to different 3 hospitals. Doon sa PGH, doon sa Tala, at saka sa Lung Center. And also, sinama na rin ang simulations natin from RITM papuntang airport going to Cebu. So, ibig sabihin yung transport natin ng ating vaccine going to other places in Visayas and Mindanao, sinisimulate po din natin yun.
Ensuring a refined actual time and motion of the vaccine deployment, he said, will prevent the possibility of vaccine wastage. wastage, and Wednesday simulation included laying down the coordination system from the arrival of the vaccines to the airport's point of entry, going to the warehouse, and then the point of distribution. Mr. Galvez said they will also hold a series of simulation exercises on vaccine transportation going to the other areas in Visayas and Mindanao.
President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday appealed to the Communist Party of the Philippines, or CPP, and its armed wing, the New People's Army, or NPA, to guarantee the unhampered and safe transport of the COVID-19 vaccines throughout the country. Duterte also asked the CPP and NPA not to intercept the vaccines and to observe the rules of humanity because the vaccine is for the Filipino people. Let's listen in.
I'm appealing. I am appealing to the Communist Party of the Philippines, yung pinaka-umbrella. I don't consider yung mga NDF, pati NPA. The Communist Party of the Philippines must guarantee that the vaccines in the course of their being transported to areas where are no city health officers or medical persons, na huwag ninyong galawin ang medisina. Allow the vaccines to be transported freely and safely. I am asking you now to observe that rule because that is for the Filipino people. As I have said, the money belongs to the Filipino people. It credits the credit goes to no one. Sa inyo ito, mga taong Pilipino, pera ninyo ito.
In the same meeting, the National Policy Against COVID-19 and Vaccine Czar Carlito Galvez Jr. said the military and the police will help in securing the delivery of the vaccines.
In a related news, Malacanang shrugged off the suggestion made by the Communist Party of the Philippines, or CPP, to let the COVID-19 vaccine delivery in far-flung areas be handled by the Red Cross and other civil humanitarian agencies instead of the military. In a palace briefing, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the national government is sticking with its original plan to make the armed forces of the Philippines in charge of vaccine delivery in these areas. Let's listen in.
Una-una, we have a rollout plan. Yun po ang masusunod kahit anong sabihin pa ng CPP, NPA. Number two, I guess they have freedom of expression, but they are tagged as a terrorist group. So parang they can express their opinion, but hanggang dun lang po yun. Ang ating rollout plan po ay binuo po yan sa tulong po ng mga pangunahing eksperto, and it will remain.
All right. Esther and I will be back with more right after this short break.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. The latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights, Sharpen your instincts for smart decision making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Sa anniversary nila, kapatid! Wow! Bakit mo suot yung sing-sing ko? Anniversary gift ni Carding yan sa akin.
Sumaya tayong lahat. Saya-saya.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. China on Friday warned off a U.S. warship sailing near contested islands in the South China Sea. Beijing said the first such encounter made public since the inauguration of President Joe Biden. The USS John S. McCain broke into China's Xizha international waters without the permission of the Chinese government, Beijing's military said in a statement using its name for the disputed Paracel Islands. The Arleigh-Burke-class guided missile destroyer on Thursday also conducted a routine transit through the waterways separating Chinese mainland and Taiwan, which Beijing says constitutes parts of its territory. Washington has argued that such exercises are in line with international law and help defend the right of passage through the region amid competing claims by China and other governments. China lays claim to nearly all the South China Sea, including the Paracel Islands. Taiwan, the Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, and Vietnam also claim parts of the region believed to hold valuable oils and gas deposits.
Meanwhile, President Duterte said he will not allow the National Telecommunications Commission or the NTC to grant ABS-CBN permit to operate even if the broadcast giant gets fresh franchise from Congress. The President said ABS-CBN should settle first their unpaid taxes. Let's listen in.
Ang Congress is planning to restore the franchise of the Lopez. Wala akong problema doon kung i-restore ninyo. But if you say that if they can operate, kung may ano na sila, no, I will not allow them. I will not allow the NTC to grant them the permit to operate. Kung ibigay ninyo yung franchise because it is within your power to do it, go ahead. Alam mo bakit? Unless and until babayaran ng mga Lopez ang taxes nila, I will ignore your franchise and I will not give them the license to operate. Kalokohan yan. Parang binigyan mo sila ng price for their being for committing criminal acts. Ito yung pinagbili ng Lopez. Yung Lopez of Companies kasi maraming utang. So binili nila na lahat, pati yung mga utang pinagbili ng Lopez doon sa DBP. Meron akong kulang dito because I am not quite familiar. Ito lang akin eh. Pero ito dumating sa akin and I said in my official capacity as a government worker. Ngayon, pinagbili ng Lopez doon sa DBP. Binili ng DBP. Tapos, merong batas, SPAV. Yung SPAV is a law that was made to help ailing banking institutions. Aywan ko, ito bangko ito, pero napabili nila ang kanilang utang lahat doon sa DBP. But after a few years, binili ng DBP uli yung pinagbili nila. Pinagbili nila sa DBP yung pinagbili nila. This time, medyo wala na yung mga utang-utang. Condoned, kung ano-ano ang nilagay nila. Ngayon, unless it is clear, I think Congress, I understand, started an investigation, but stopped nung dumating na sila dito kay Lopez. There were so many investigations about banking, except that pagdating sa kila Lopez, hinuwinto sila. Dumating sa akin ito in official capacity. Ang gawa ko lang nito is, I think, I'll pass it on to the Ombudsman. Para sa akin, ang Ombudsman ang pinaka-independent body na mag-solve nito. Gusto ko lang magbigay sa kanila kasi pera ito ng tao. It's the government money that is involved.
To recall, Congress was unable to renew the network's congressional franchise before its expansion date on May 4 last year. ABS-CBN, upon the directive of the NTC shutdown order, ceased its broadcast operations on May 5 last year. The previous House hearings have exhaustively discussed the network's franchise issues, including the citizenship of ABS-CBN Chair Emeritus Gaby Lopez, the possible violation of the constitutional limits on foreign ownership, reported labor and tax violations, and other violations of the terms of its legislative franchise. The NTC on June 30 last year also issued 2 cease and desist orders directing ABS-CBN to halt the operation of its digital television transmission using Ankara Broadcasting Corp's Channel 43 and the direct-to-home satellite transmission of its cable firm Sky Cable Corp.
Malacanang on Thursday questioned the supposed refusal of the local media giant ABS-CBN Corporation to pay off its debts to the state-owned Development Bank of the Philippines, or DBP. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said it was unjust for ABS-CBN to get away by not paying its 1.6 billion peso in loans to DBP. In a virtual palace press briefing, Roque noted that the network was thriving when it was still in debt to DBP. Let's watch this.
Hindi naman nalulug. Yung unang panahon, at hindi ko po alam kung kailan to, no? Ang ABS-CBN ay may mga pagkakautang, mga pananagutan na ang ginawa niya, ibinenta po niya, bibigay ka ng asset mo sa SPAV dahil hindi mo binabayaran ay yung pagkakautang. Pero bakit ang ABS-CBN, hindi naman siya nalulugi ng mga panahon na yon? Binigay lang niya yung asset niya sa SPAV dahil ayaw niyang bayaran. At isa sa pinagkakautangan niya, isang gobyernong bangko na DBP. So yan po yung kwento na nakarating kay Presidente. No? Hindi tama na hindi ka naman nalulugi, hindi mo binayaran yung utang mo at binigay mo sa SPAV. So, pero ang decision po ng Presidente, hahayaan na niya ang Ombudsman mag-decision dyan. Dahil sa totoo lang po, legal naman yung pagbibigay sa SPAV. Pero ang issue is, meron kasi tayong anti-graft law na entering into a contract disadvantageous to government. Sabihin na nating legal, Pero kung hindi naman po paborto sa gobyerno at hindi nabayaran yung utang na due sa isang pampublikong bangko na hindi naman nalulugi ang ABS-CBN, tama ba yun? So yan po yung issue na i-determine ng ating ombudsman. Tama ba yung nangyari na hindi nalulugi ang ABS-CBN pero hindi binayaran ang pagkakautang sa DBP dahil nga po na-assign sa SPAV. Antayin na lang po natin ang magiging desisyon ng ombudsman.
Meanwhile, the Colombian government is interested to supply the Philippines with pork and beef products and has sought assistance from President Duterte to facilitate the admissibility process. Colombian ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Marcela Ordóñez Fernandez, made this request on February 10 after she presented her credentials to the chief executive. It also comes amid the surging meat prices in Philippine markets. Let's listen in.
We are interested in selling pork meat and beef to the Philippines, and we would welcome, Mr. President, any support you can give us to accelerate the admissibility process. We also want to see an increase in foreign investment both ways.
Aside from commerce and economic cooperation, His Excellency Ambassador Fernandez said Colombia could also share its reintegration program with the Philippines. Both countries already exchanged talks and best practices on reintegration, but Fernandez believes that the Philippines and Colombia could further develop this area of cooperation. Colombia also sought more engagement with Manila in the area of education. President Duterte, meanwhile, said Manila is ready to develop ties with the South American nation on trade and investment, defense, and in addressing non-traditional security issues, including terrorism and violent extremism, drug trafficking, and other transnational crimes.
Don't go away. ASEAN in Focus will be right back.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Tuloy-tuloy ang saya sa 2021 dahil hatid ng Net25 para sa inyo ang pinakabagong game show na talaga namang mapapakanta ka sa sarap. It's singing time na! Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. Dito lang yan sa Net25.
Singing time!
Welcome back to the program. In Indonesia, an escaped tiger that killed keeper at zoo on Borneo Island has been captured alive after a day on loose, police said. The white Bengal tiger was found wandering in the jungle surrounding Singka Zoo in the town of Singkawang, West Kalimantan on Saturday following its escape through a hole. Another tiger that broke free was shot dead earlier. Local police chief Prasetyo Adi Wibowo told journalists last Saturday, and we quote, "We found and captured the second tiger by sedating it with a tranquilizer." The pair of 18-month-old female Bengal tigers, previously thought to be Sumatran, escaped from the zoo after days of torrential rain created a hole near their enclosure. A 47-year-old male zookeeper and several animals were found dead near the tiger cage. Conservationists said they were its keeper and showed aggressive behavior towards humans.
In other news, Manila and Moscow both expressed willingness to revive their sister city agreement to boost the arts and tourism and other sectors. This is good for us, for the tourism, arts, culture investment. I will be happy to sign and exchange things, and we always welcome things that we can learn and duplicate, as what we are trying to do nowadays, according to Manila Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Dumagoso. And he said this during the visit of His Excellency, Ambassador of the Russian Federation to the Philippines, Marat Pavlov, at the Manila City Hall. Mayor Dumagoso said the only thing missing to formalize the revival of the sister city agreement between the two are their signatures. As a reply, His Excellency Ambassador Pavlov said Moscow would not wait to open, or could not wait to open its doors anew once the COVID-19 pandemic is over. Mayor Dumagoso said Manila would benefit from the sister city agreement, especially that the theater art of Moscow is very popular and that Manila's theater artists may learn many things from them.
After the pandemic torpedoed his chance to work at a Michelin-starred New York restaurant, Lim Wei Kiat returned to his roots by becoming a Singapore street food chef cooking local fare. The 25-year-old is among a small but growing number of young Singaporean street food vendors or hawkers, fueling hopes that a new generation will preserve the city-state's culinary traditions. Still, there are many challenges that make it hard to lure young Singaporeans from better paid office jobs, such as rising costs and long hours. And then, there is the stigma. Let's watch this.
I love chicken rice, so why not start with something that I love and I'm passionate about? The local and traditional iconic dishes will be disappearing if younger people do not take over the store or learn these dishes.
Earlier, back in the day, it was really seen as a profession for those who have no root into life. So that has changed a lot today, but that perception hasn't gone. I think there's still a school of people who would say, "What? You want to be a hawker? What's wrong with you?"
Singapore is full of open-air food courts offering a wide variety of cuisines influenced by Southeast Asian nations, ethnic Chinese, Indian, and Muslim populations. Even after the city-state ballooned into an affluent financial hub, the hawker tradition lived on and remains a central part of everyday life for many. The United Nations recognized the tradition as intangible cultural heritage in December, describing the centers where hawkers toil as community dining rooms that bring together people from diverse backgrounds. But many chefs are heading towards retirement. Their median age is 59, and young Singaporeans often shun the trade, stoking fears that hawkers' traditions and their delicious dishes could be lost. Finally, in our news, lip reading suddenly got tricky when everyone covered their face during the coronavirus pandemic. But Indonesian tailors have hit upon the perfect solution: see-through masks. Let's watch this.
Okay? Yeah. Okay.
Masker ini bisa dipakai untuk teman-teman tuli dan teman-teman yang bisa mendengar.
Apa dicari? Siap.
Again, thank you, Esther, for joining me today and helping me out. Have a great weekend.
It's always my pleasure, Alma, and that's the latest news around ASEAN. Thank you all for watching. From EBC Thailand Bureau, this is Esther Adanga, and we live in interesting times.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. And we'll see you back on Monday. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.